that is the Veterans Aid and Attendance Benefit Program. And there is nobody better to talk about this than somebody that has been helping people with this benefit, but also someone who is a veteran themselves. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage Scott Ferguson. And man, Scott, for a veteran, you are really very patriotic today. Whoops. Oh, turn on your mic there, bud. Oh, no, Scott, I need you to unmute your mic. There you go.
Sorry about that. Sorry, jumping the gun.
Oh, it's okay. No, you're looking really patriotic today. This is great. Hey, before we dive in to the Veterans Aid and Attendance Program, and I've already started receiving questions about this, tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into advising people in this area.
Sure. So, Steve, I was in the military myself, almost 5 years. I was Army. I was in intelligence during the first Gulf War. Probably the most interesting job I've ever had in my life, and had a lot of good experiences there. I did incur some injuries during the military, and after I got out, had applied for some benefits. Long story short, not knowing how much I didn't know, it took me about 15 years to actually get my first benefits received, because
Wow.
I just didn't know the right questions. I didn't know the right people to talk to, the right processes to go about it. Then working more in the senior community, I discovered there's a lot of misinformation, not just about VA benefits, but all around, especially with government benefits, Medicaid as well, and things like that. Seems like anything with the government is never easy, and they don't come knocking on your door to tell you how to get benefits from them. They leave it to you to figure it out. And of course, they'll say, yeah, it's all on our website. But if you ever try and navigate one of the government websites, it's endless. And sometimes you don't know where to go in the rabbit hole. So
Man,
I just
that
always felt that it would be great. I wish I would have had a coach like me many years ago.
this is great. And thank you for your service. And
Glad to do it.
it just my heart breaks for folks that are serving our country and have an injury or disability. It's just it's heartbreaking. And I'm glad that you've I mean, it took 15 years, but you're getting you got some support from our government. But okay, folks, oftentimes we go down rabbit holes, and I have no doubt that we are going to go down some rabbit holes, but let's at least start talking about the Veterans Aid and Attendance Benefit Program. And now, Scott, I've got it up on my screen, sort of the textbook description of the Veterans Aid and Attendance Program is a benefit provided by the Department of Veterans Affairs that offers additional financial support to eligible veterans and their surviving spouses. And in general, the program can provide financial assistance to veterans or surviving spouses who need help with the activities of daily living, like bathing, dressing, or feeding, are bedridden due to illness, are patients of a nursing home due to physical or mental incapacity, have severe visual impairment. I'm sure that my definition is a little bit different than what happens in reality. But Scott, what is this program? And then we can dive into some questions. Tandra sent some questions before the event that we can dive into on if we qualify, how we qualify, how much you should get. Okay, I'm going to shut up and let you tell us more about this interesting program.
Sure. The VA aid attendance benefit's been around since the early 1950s. But as I said, they don't come knocking on your door to tell you how to get those benefits. And it's probably one of the most underutilized benefits that's in the VA system. It's also one of the very few benefits that is available to spouses. You know, people often confuse military retirement benefits with VA benefits. So right out of the gate, I'd like to just dispel that myth that when someone retires from the military, they're getting a pension from the Department of Defense, not from the VA. So that is just considered retirement income as far as the VA is concerned. The aid and attendance is actually an add-on and to what's called the improved pension benefit. That improved pension benefit is for impoverished veterans. But when you have the add-on of housebound or aid and attendance benefits, it allows you to use your medical expenses to reduce your income in a calculation to calculate it down to zero. And thus, if you meet the other eligibility requirements and qualifications, apply for that or get approved for that aid and attendance benefit. Typically, what they're looking for is assistance with 2 or more activities of daily living. Hence the name of the benefit, that someone needs the aid and attendance of another person. Also, what goes along with that is if someone has a cognitive impairment, that could be considered and maybe take the place of an activity of daily living if a doctor says that they need a protective environment. Also, if they have an official diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, that alone could be something that could qualify them for benefits. You had mentioned visual impairment. Blindness in itself is qualified, but their definition of blindness is different than the Social Security's definition of blindness. Not to get into too much detail, but if it's a corrected vision of 5/200 or less in both eyes, or a concentrated field of view of less than 5 degrees. I don't want to get too far into the details because everyone's circumstance is a little bit different. And I know you have a lot of questions and other things to cover, but let me throw those things out there to start, and I'll let you go on to your list of questions.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. Well, actually, I noticed here, and one of the questions that came in from Kathleen, who says, I served in the U.S. Army from 80 to 81, and was honorably discharged because the only war that was then was the Cold War. I've been under the impression that I have almost no benefits. Is this correct? And I see here it says, to be eligible, veterans must have served at least 90 days of active duty with at least 1 day during a wartime period. With Kathleen's question about 80 and 81, how would she evaluate her eligibility?
Sure. It is very confusing. Now, the aid and attendance benefit, what you were reading, Steve, is specific qualifications for that one benefit. Okay. I'll give you an example. For aid and attendance benefits, they have that qualification of wartime dates of service. Kathleen may not be eligible for that if she didn't serve at least 1 day during a wartime period, but it doesn't mean she's disqualified from all of her other veterans benefits. Okay. There are a multitude of veterans benefits that we could broadcast 24 hours, 7 days a week for a month and not cover all the benefits that are out there for veterans. So there are a lot, Kathleen. Don't get discouraged. There are things any veteran can, when they need it, maybe apply for home care benefits or improvements to the home if they need a handicap accessible shower, and benefits through the healthcare department, benefits through the burial part, the cemeteries, the national cemeteries and the state cemeteries. And if there's a disability, regardless of whether you serve during a wartime period, that could be applied for compensation. So don't be discouraged just because you don't meet one of the criteria that we're talking about today for aid and attendance.
Okay, this is great. And I am going to circle back to that because you brought up some really cool things that I had no idea about. And folks, before we turned on the mics and camera, I was chatting with Scott and I was sharing with him one of the questions that we're going to go through right now. But the one of the things that he said, Steve, a lot of times I will sit down and what I recommend is that an individual will talk to me because I can listen to their situation, because while they may qualify for veterans aid and attendance based on their income and their assets, it's better for them to go the Medicaid route. And so I guess there are benefits out there, and the important thing is having somebody that's knowledgeable of all the different options so that you can figure out what would make more sense. Is that correct?
Absolutely, I would agree with that. And whether you come to me for advice, I would definitely look for someone, a professional in the industry that knows these things inside and out. The VA, not to sell them short, but if you go ask them about aid and attendance benefits, they're going to go in it with blinders on like this and say, okay, here's the forms, fill them out, see what happens, and we'll see if we can get that for you. They're not going to evaluate the healthcare circumstances or the family circumstances that maybe getting those aid and attendance benefits could interfere with Medicaid. Maybe we're better to do Medicaid first and then do aid and attendance on the back end. That's the type of things where, veteran service officers or people that work for the county, they're not allowed to give you that type of advice. They're actually prohibited from getting into, providing an opinion, providing an advice, referring to other outside services. They have to follow the chart that says, if someone asks about this, you go to this form, you go down here, and where it says aid and attendance, you give them these forms. So, if your tax advisor did that and said, here's the forms, fill them out and send them into the IRS and see what happens, you'd probably slam the door on them and never go back again. But unfortunately, that's the way the VA is kind of set up. They can provide a little bit. They'll help you put your name where it says name and your address where it says address, but they're not going to evaluate your circumstances or, narrow in on some of the qualifications or give you options that might be better for the family.
This is great. Okay. I love the fact that we got tons of questions coming in, and I'll do this several times during the discussion, but I dropped in Scott's website, his phone number, and his email. So if you have to jump off and you got a question or you want to reach out, you can reach out to Scott and his team, and they do complimentary consultations. And then depending on, and somebody asked, where are you located? But you serve the entire country. So if somebody's in California, you can help them. Where are you physically located? You're Philadelphia, I think, right?
Near Philadelphia in the suburbs,
Okay.
Delaware County, Pennsylvania, is my home base where I was born and raised.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Tandra reached out to us earlier today and sent an email, and I thought her email was great. She's actually a nursing home social worker, and she said she had a bunch of questions here. They okay, and is there a checklist of information that is needed? So Scott, like, just for Tandra and for all of us, if somebody walks into her office and she says, hey, are you a veteran? That's the first thing that we should all be asking our loved ones and clients if they served. Then
Absolutely.
what are some of the questions that you would that she should ask to determine whether this person should begin investigating the veterans aid and attendance benefits?
Well, I think, I'm always very careful about that because I get so many people come to me that say, somebody told me I wasn't qualified. And that was 3 years ago when we moved into assisted living. And now we're out of money and we're coming to you for the aid and attendance benefit or help, or what should we do? And my conversation turns into, well, now you're out of money. It's a Medicaid conversation, unless the family's got money. They should have actually come 3 years earlier to find out, but they got misinformation. So I'm very careful about telling people to pre-qualify. Let's put it that way. Nobody can pre-qualify anybody for these benefits. Now, having a certain amount of knowledge certainly helps someone understand it a little bit better. There are things like what they call an income and asset limitations. I'll give you a quick rundown of 5 things. They're going to look at dates of service to make sure we have 1 day served during a wartime period, 90 days active duty service outside of training. That's a piece that a lot of people miss because reservists typically cannot get the benefit if they only did their weekend a month and 2 weeks a year. They don't have a consecutive 90 days in active duty unless they were called to active duty during that wartime period. A doctor needs to verify the level of care that's needed, which will justify the unreimbursed medical expenses. The unreimbursed medical expenses are used to calculate the income down. I saw one of the questions pop up. What's the income limitation? Someone can have a $7,000 a month income and they can still get the benefit if they have $7,000 a month of unreimbursed medical expense, such as the cost of assisted living. So it's not a flat answer, but it's very confusing because the VA has it on their website that the income limit this year in 2024 is $1,478 for a widow, $2,300 for a single veteran, or $2,727 for a married veteran or a veteran with a dependent. Well, people look at that and say, mom or dad, they make more than that with their Social Security and pension, so I'm just not going to apply. But they didn't know that you can use the medical expenses to calculate their income down to zero.
Okay.
So that being part of it, and there is an asset limitation. I still tell people don't be discouraged because of the asset limitation. I'd still like to talk to families about what a plan is, because we could get somebody qualified today if they're reasonably close. Right now, it's 155,000 and some change, minus 1 month worth of gross income. So if, in round numbers, if mom or dad has a $2,000 income, their target number might be 153,000. If they're at 200,000, we should still have a talk because there's steps we could take to still get them qualified next month. You know, they can prepay their burial or a variety of other things, or get other improvements that they need to help enhance their lifestyle to get spend down a little bit more quickly.
Okay. Now, okay, so yeah, and I see Ruby here says we were told we could not get benefits for home health due to our income. And that might be accurate for this program, but it's worth you know, talking to a few different people. And also, I think one of the things is to be aware of this program for future benefits, because if you don't qualify now, but you're spending, you know, thousands of dollars a month to receive home care, you can have it on the calendar when, okay, at this date, we might qualify, and that's a time to apply. Is that how it sometimes works, Scott?
Exactly. I'd rather talk to people and be ahead of the curve, and we can plan for, hey, at the rate that we're spending down, we'll be financially qualified in 6 months from now. So let's follow up in 5 months. That way we're opening the claim at the right time. And then right when we hit that 6 months, we don't lose any benefits, because that's when they're within the asset limitation. So,
Okay.
again, I saw a couple questions pop up, and just real quick, income limitation is a calculation. I don't care if somebody makes $6,000 or $7,000 a month, we might still be able to get benefits depending on their out-of-pocket unreimbursed medical expenses.
Great. Okay. Now, back to Tandra's question. Next question is, what is the term or turnaround time on the determination? So let's say that, you know, somebody either reaches out to you and gets your guidance and you help them apply, or they just go to the VA website and they apply themselves. After you get the application in, when can you expect to find out if you're approved and be reimbursed for your expenses?
Yeah, great question, Steve. It really depends on how well that packet is put together when it goes in the first time. So obviously working with someone that has more experience in that is going to be to your benefit. You know, it's funny, just this morning, I was talking to somebody on my team. We've had a few of them recently have been turned around in 60 days, 68 days, 76 days. Typically, we're in that area of about 90 to 100 from the time that completed, fully developed package gets submitted to the VA. If there's a fiduciary assignment, the VA could drag that out for another 6 months, get left to their own devices, but we know how to keep that down and compress to about an additional 30 days. If you look on the VA website, they'll actually say for first-time claims, they have a denial rate of 85% and expect 9 to 12 months or more for a decision. Now, notice I didn't say approval, just a decision. So not having that packet fully developed with everything that it needs leaves the VA opportunity to ask questions. And every time they ask a question could be a 60 or 90-day delay because they push a button and the letter doesn't go out until the beginning of the following month. So it can all go out in bulk mail. If it comes to the family member, they may have to schedule some time off to go get that information. They take it and they get it back to the VA. And, you know, each one of those steps takes 30 days. And when the VA gets it, maybe you're lucky if it gets looked at again within 30 days. So them asking one question can create a 90-day delay every time they do that.
And in graduate school, I took some public policy classes, and I had never studied anything like that. But one of the things that I learned is that this is a technique for the government to weed out fraud and to weed out, you know, folks that are taking advantage of a program, but it drives all of us who are legitimately doing this and need the benefits, drives us crazy, this denial and things of that nature.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Now, how is the back to Tandra, and then I'm going to get to all these other questions, but Tandra had some good ones. How is the assessment completed? So you like, how do they evaluate you and determine whether you would qualify for this to begin with?
Sure. There are several forms that do accompany the packet when you go in there. One of them is an evaluation by the doctor that the doctor will fill out this form. It's called a 21-2680. It's for an attendance benefits. And that is a required form because the doctor needs to show that we need that assistance of another person or aid in attendance of another person on a regular basis. And again, knowing those qualifications, 2 or more activities of daily living. There's also things that are IADLs that are incidental to activities of daily living, but the cost of those don't actually count unless we first have assistance with 2 or more ADLs, the blindness or the official diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's. So, you know, there's a few things there as far as qualifications and how that assessment goes. If you're working with the VA, they're going to send you a packet of forms, kind of leave it up to you to figure out how to get those done. If you're working with a professional organization or an attorney, they're going to walk you through a little bit more of that and say, okay, this form means we need this person to sign it, and we need to have this information checked off appropriately, or these boxes filled in appropriately. You know, that assessment is done differently depending upon which office you go to and how hands-on they are going to be with you during the process.
Okay. All right. And Tandra, we're trying to get through these. Okay. And as like a social worker that like Tandra, who's working in a nursing home, what's expected of her? Like, I mean, is there other than connecting her client to the VA directly or to somebody like you who can guide the family through this? Is there any expectations for the healthcare provider that may ultimately be receiving these benefits?
The healthcare providers that's making the referrals, typically they are not involved in much of the process other than maybe signing off on a couple of forms verifying that the claimant is receiving those benefits, or well, not necessarily the benefits, but receiving the care that's needed and checking the appropriate boxes and signing off how much it costs and when they started their care. But every claimant, it's always encouraged, because most of these claimants, and that is the person that is actually filing a claim with the VA to receive the monetary benefits. So typically that veteran or the surviving spouse of that veteran, you should have a representative with the VA. If there's a cognitive impairment, they're going to have a fiduciary anyway. And this is a person that is, you would fill out a form. The VA does not recognize civilian power of attorney. They have their own form for that. And when you fill that out, they become the authorized representative. And then the VA can speak to that person on their behalf. So very important, very, very important that any claimant, in our opinion, have a third-party representative or a claimant representative. And that is usually their power of attorney, an adult child, the son, the daughter, grandchild, niece, nephew, somebody like that that they can work with. And if they have computer capabilities, it does make things much, much easier and makes things process much faster. The VA is highly encouraging people to submit things electronically, submit online. They actually keep everything on file when it's submitted online. They've sent out notices that when paper documents are sent in, the information will be scanned, but the actual, my understanding is the actual documents don't get saved like they do if they were submitted electronically. So having that representative help the senior.
I just wanted to make sure that I heard what you said correctly, that if I have a power of attorney that's drafted by my private attorney, and I'm a veteran, I still need to have the VA power of attorney document drafted up.
That's correct. The VA
Okay.
does not recognize civilian power of attorney.
Wow, this, I've done a lot of discussions. I've never heard this one, but this could save people a lot of headaches. Now, is this the VA Advanced Directive Durable Power of Attorney for Healthcare and Living Will? Is that the form?
It is not.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, Scott, when we hang up, if you don't mind emailing me the link to the form,
Right.
I'll put that on the recording link.
Sure. It's a 21-0845 is the one that you want to use for that. But yeah, we'll make sure you have that information.
21-0845.
0845. Authorization to release information to a third party.
Okay, great. Okay, now I'm going to get to these questions, folks. Thanks for hanging in there.
Lots of questions popping up. I'm seeing Steve.
Okay, Ruby says, if my husband gets 100% disability classification, do I qualify for any of these benefits?
So when someone has a 100% disability rating, they get the bigger of the two benefits. The aid and attendance benefit is a smaller benefit. So that married veteran would be $2,727 per month versus closer to $4,000 a month as a married veteran getting 100% disability rating. They do get a stipend on top of it if they meet all of the additional qualifications of a couple hundred extra dollars. I believe it's $399.58 if I'm not mistaken. Same applies for a widow that's getting DIC, or dependency and indemnity compensation. So referring back to Ruby that asked this question, if that disabled veteran were to pass away and the illness or injury was a contributing factor to his early demise, they should apply. Any widow of a disabled veteran should apply for the DIC benefit. That is $612.75 per month paid to the widow of a veteran that was 100% disabled and died as that illness or injury being a contributing factor.
Now, the language says surviving spouses. So because her husband is alive and disabled, this program is until he passes, or if he passes, Ruby would not be able to apply for any of these services. Is that correct?
That's right. Now, as a disabled veteran, there are other benefits outside of this that are available to Ruby that
Okay.
maybe we can cover in another broadcast at another time again. But staying focused on the aid and attendance benefit, here's the way to remember this. The surviving spouse is often referred to as the widow's benefit. So that spouse does not get that benefit or does not need to apply for that benefit because they would be denied until they become a widow. As long as the veteran is alive, it is the veteran's benefit. If the veteran needs care, then it's the 2727 because they have a dependent, that's the spouse. If the veteran is single, it's 2300, or if they're a widower. If it is a widow, it's 1478 if the veteran is not alive. There is one circumstance in there where if the veteran is still alive and healthy and the spouse is the one that needs care, the spouse's care costs and unreimbursed medical expenses can be used in the calculation. Then that veteran becomes an impoverished veteran, even though he's healthy. And again, if he meets all of the other qualifications and eligibility requirements, then he could be eligible for the improved pension benefit, which is a lesser amount, but it's still a benefit to be had.
Okay. And let's see. I think I found the form. Is this the one, 210845?
There you go. Authorization to disclose personal information to a third party. That allows the VA to speak to your third party representative. And they
Wow.
must be signed by the claimant, someone that has power of attorney, or there are, I'm not going to get too deep into these forms because we don't use them because they're too, this particular form where you can, does allow you to sign for that person causes more problems because you can't sign that form to be the representative, to make yourself the representative. So then you're stuck with only being able to mail to the VA and you're not allowed to communicate with them. So,
Holy cow. This
yeah.
is a lot to navigate. And like I said, I did a quick search, folks, to try to find the form Scott was talking about, and I would have never have typed in the right words to get to this one. And it's very vague, this form. I will tell you, there's no way I could have found that form. Just okay. All right, let me get back. We got a ton of questions here. So let me try to handle these. Okay. Barbara says, what if the income is cut off for aid and attendance or home health aid in our home? If a veteran already receives disability, can they qualify for other home care benefits? What if the income is cut off? I'm not,
I'm not sure about the income there. Well, let's just address it in a hypothetical manner and say if the veteran had a disability rating and it was shown that their disability improved, the VA has the option to reduce their rating or stop their rating, which also means reducing the amount of money that they would receive or stop the money that they receive. When that rating is above 70%, a veteran can get 100% of their health care covered by the VA. So if that rating decreases, some of the money decreases as well, they may lose that benefit that goes along with having a higher disability rating.
okay.
Does that?
And then she also talks about if a veteran's already receiving disability, can they qualify for other benefits? And you talked about that earlier. It's one of those, it depends, and it's going to be whatever is the higher level of compensation.
Exactly. Right, exactly. Like the aid and attendance benefit, it would be the higher of the two. So if they have a partial disability, say a 60% rating is somewhere around $1,400. But if they qualify for the aid and attendance benefit, the aid and attendance benefit for a single veteran is $2,300. So it just makes sense to get the bigger benefit.
Okay. All right. Nicole says, is there a person in each county that assists with aid and attendance, or can anybody reach out to you? So anybody can reach out to Scott and his team, correct? Like no matter where you are in the country.
Absolutely.
But out of curiosity, if let's pretend that you and other folks that are doing similar things as you didn't exist anywhere in the United States, basically there's one place that we need to contact, and that is the Veterans Administration. There's not like county offices, or how does that work?
Typically, most counties are going to have their own representative for the
Okay.
VA. They can help with some things. I have not found very many that are, very well versed with the aid and attendance benefit. I'm not saying they're not out there, but I would welcome anyone to go through a series of questions and evaluation with our office or any professional's office, and then go through those same questions with the county office and compare your results and answers as to who's giving you a better overview of your family situation and needs, and providing advice that can help in a multitude of different ways.
All right, Shannon, I was waiting for this question. Shannon asks, what fees does Dr. Ferguson's team charge to help a veteran apply for these benefits?
Well, it's funny, and when we don't actually charge for the application itself, but there are things where we can help family members, but it's kind of like asking us, what are your taxes going to be next year? I don't know, because I don't have enough information just yet to figure that out, right? How much is it going to cost to fix your car? I don't know what's broken. I don't know what needs to be fixed. I don't know how much time it's going to take, and the availability of anyone else in the family that's going to be able to contribute their time and resources to that, right? Do they need a representative or someone to gather up that information? And maybe they need someone to be a third party and take on a limited power of attorney, where we might have to bring in another service to help with that. All that's going to be included in that. Does it actually get to the point where we need legal advice? Do we need to bring in an attorney, or are there other planning options where we might need to have an attorney provide something, maybe even something as simple as a caregiver agreement to create that unreimbursed medical expense for someone that's living at home. Again, those aren't the type of things that the county office is going to provide you, or even know that those options are out there, and they're even limited in the amount of advice they could give, even if they are aware of them.
Okay, but when somebody calls you, the good thing is that there's no charge for the initial gathering information, and you're
That's correct.
probably giving them tons of good advice during that call. And then if it gets to the point where you're going to assist them, you would be very transparent with the additional costs that
Absolutely.
would be involved.
Yes. I always like taking at least a good half hour, 45 minutes with every family that calls in, just to find out what their circumstances are. I'll always provide you with some emails with some additional information, and good advice on here's what you need to do with this, here's how to go about it, here's additional information that could help, links to how to set up the portal on the VA website to upload your documents, all of those things. I want to make sure families have those. Like I said, Steve, in the very beginning, I wish I had somebody like me when I was trying to get my benefits at first. Even if I decided to run on my own, it would have been much easier. But it's up to the family to decide that, and there's no Jack in the Box going to pop up out at anybody.
Okay, I knew this was going to happen too. In the beginning, we were talking about income limits, and I've got several people that were asking you to repeat that, and a few people said they want me to type it in there as well. So tell us again the income limits for veterans aid and attendance in 2024.
That's great, and I'll tell you what to type in as the answer, Steve, and that is, it is a calculation. Okay. The VA will say the numbers that I said. There's an income limit of $1,478 for a widow, $2,300 for a veteran. $1,478 a month for a widow,
78,
or a surviving spouse.
Okay,
2,300 for a veteran,
and
and
how much?
2,300 for a veteran,
Okay,
2727 for a veteran with a dependent, such as a spouse or disabled child. But again, using the medical expenses to calculate their income down to zero, we could have a household income of $6,000, but one of them is in assisted living at a cost of $6,000, and that means their income is $0 left over at the end of the month, and that's called IVAP, income for VA purposes.
okay, income for VA purposes.
Income for VA purposes is a calculation. Yes.
Income for VA purposes. Okay, that makes sense. So yes, I mean, at first glance, you're looking at some, lower numbers, close to what many folks get on Social Security each month. However, as Scott had said, if you're in an assisted living and you have $7,000 a month of qualifying expenses, it's going to be calculated in with that. Do I have it the right way?
Yes, exactly. It's part of the
Okay.
calculation. Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, another question, like, if you qualify for these benefits, where can these benefits be spent? Like, is it assisted living, home care, nursing home, memory care? Like, are there any restrictions on where this could be spent?
All the above is included in that, Steve. And as long as it's to benefit the household, meaning that married couple or the individual receiving the benefits, that's what they're looking for. VA does what's called an EVR, an eligibility verification report. They can do it as often as they like. Some people we know have gotten it quite often. Other people we know have been getting the benefit for many years and never had it. But the VA can ask at any time, how is this money being spent? And they want to know, especially if there's a fiduciary involved that's receiving the money on behalf of that person, that it's being spent for their benefit. So, a good way to think of that, as long as it's not being given away, as long as it's not being used for something else. I mean, if mom and dad, they may be ill and need help with 2 ADLs, but maybe they're still good enough to make a trip to Florida. So they can pay for their trip to Florida, but they can't pay for the kids' trip to Florida.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, Melissa, this is a good question. Melissa says, I'm a nurse at the health department in Maryland, and we have veterans that need assistance. We would not want to overwhelm you. How could we make a proper referral? And Melissa, that's wonderful of you. I guess like one thing that I would recommend Melissa does is call Scott and his team and just become familiar with the team, so that if you sent a referral that was not appropriate, then you've got a point of contact there that it's like, hey, Melissa, there's not much that we could do to help this veteran that you sent to us. Is that a good strategy, or do you have any sort of guidelines on the types of calls that you can help people with versus the ones that would be more appropriate to send somewhere else?
Sure, absolutely. And we really appreciate people like Melissa sending referrals, but we also appreciate that, yes, when you talk about veterans benefits, it's kind of like standing on a college campus and holding up a sign that says free beer, right? Everybody starts coming out of the woodwork, and we want to help as many as we can, but we have limited staff as well. I would encourage Melissa, please, let's have a call and talk about that in a little bit more depth. It's a little more than we should probably get into on a public forum. I'll let you know a little bit more about qualifications, what's good, other resources that we have that we'll share with you, that you can share with veterans if they're asking certain questions about certain things, and the right way to guide them in the right direction. And if we happen to be the right direction, that's great. And if we're not the right direction, we still want to help as many vets and spouses as we can. But we appreciate people like Melissa, and please leave your contact information or with Steve, or so we can get in touch and have a call about that. I
Yeah,
think
we've
the
been
first week would
posting your
be,
contact info
yeah, you can
several
email
times, and it'll
over.
be on the recording as well.
Yeah.
Okay, Sean and a couple of people asked this. I dropped some things into chat, but what years are considered wartime? And I looked it up, and World War II, December 7th, 41 through December 31st, 46. Korean conflict, 1950 through 1955. The Vietnam era, which is considered Feb 28, 1961 through May 75. And then also August 5th, 64 through 75. And then the Gulf War, which is 1990 to present day. Um, it, I'm assuming that's pretty accurate, that what I found, Scott?
It is, and there is a couple caveats in there. Gulf War veterans, 1990 to present, they are a different qualification. They need to have completed 2 years of service or their military obligation. So if they signed up for 4 years, they complete that, unless, of course, there's something like an illness, injury, or medical discharge. In those early days of Vietnam, it was considered a police action from February of 28 through August 4th of 60. I'm sorry, February 28th of 61 through August 4th of 64. And there is a requirement where the veteran needed to be boots on the ground or in a hostile area. That does include blue water Navy veterans, another whole show that we could talk about. But they need to be considered in country during that time. That is the only time that's considered. You could have been stationed any other time frame, like August 5th of 64 through May of 75. That veteran could have been stationed anywhere stateside in the United States. They didn't have to be in the war. They didn't have to be boots on the ground. They don't have to be a combat veteran, but they needed to be available to go to war at least one day during one of those periods served.
Okay. Um, I'm looking at the clock. It's 12:50 East Coast time. Folks, I know some of you all budget an hour. We got a lot of questions. Scott, can you hang on a little bit longer than an hour and we can get through these? And
Whatever you like to do, Steve.
great,
Absolutely.
great. Okay, good. That takes a little pressure off. And remember, folks, this is going to be recorded, so you can go to the recording. What I'll also try to do is I'll do a transcript of this, and that might make it easy for you to find things as well. And I'll put that on the recording link. But okay, Caitlin says, how is the aid and attendance benefit paid out? Does the VA send a check to the person, or does it go directly to the provider?
It goes directly into the bank account of the person applying for benefits.
Okay.
It does not pay out to an individual provider. If the claimant is not capable of handling or managing their own finances or instructing someone to do so, then the VA will assign a fiduciary, and that fiduciary will have the responsibility of managing that money for that claimant that's incapable of doing it themselves.
Okay. Um, let's see. Okay. Kate has a question here, and I hope I get it right. It says, so even if a veteran has financial power of attorney, should each veteran sign the VA power of attorney document, or is the POA per civilian documents able to sign the VA forms? An example would be a client who has advanced dementia and can no longer sign their own documents.
Again, the VA does not recognize civilian power of attorney. If someone is completely incapable of signing, meaning they cannot move their hands or arms, or they're comatose or something like that, that's about the only time we, use the other forms that I referred to earlier, because those forms make things so problematic. The VA even says they have a place on certain forms where if the person just can hold something in a tight fist and make an X or a mark, and two people witness that, then that would suffice. The reason being, and what I was told when I asked this question of the VA, is that the VA wants to know they're sending money to a live person that put pen to paper. With all the senior fraud that's going on out there these
Ah,
days, they're always very concerned that someone else would be signing a name for somebody. Maybe that person's already deceased or trying to impersonate somebody, whatever the case may be. They want to know that they're sending money to a live person, and they want that person, even if they don't have the cognitive wherewithal to understand what they're signing, they still want that person to sign. And then the VA will determine if they have the cognitive ability to manage their funds. And if not, they'll assign a fiduciary.
okay. Well, this is very interesting. I've never heard of a document being processed that way, but it's important to know, and I understand the rationale on that. You're right. I mean, folks, you know, it is frustrating that for government programs that you need somebody like Scott to help you navigate this, but at the same time, it's our government needs to make things kind of difficult for all the shysters that are out there taking our, our tax dollars, and we know that fraud exists out there.
Unfortunately, it does, Steve.
Yeah. Okay. All right, um let's see where are we at here. Does the healthcare provider have to be employed through an agency, or can it be a private aid, or let's even add a family member to the mix there?
Absolutely. Very good question. And it gives me an opportunity to segue into a couple other benefits as well, real quick. For the aid and attendance benefit, a care can be provided, paid care can be provided by anyone other than the spouse. If it's paid to the spouse, it never leaves the household, right? But if it's paid to an adult child, the adult child can be a paid caregiver, and that's still considered a legitimate medical expense. Now, I would advise having that caregiver agreement drawn up through an attorney so it's Medicaid compliant. So if Medicaid asks any questions in the future, and there's certain stipulations that go along with that, because a personal family caregiver won't, it can't charge the same rate as an outside agency that has different overhead and expenses. The VA, the segues I was talking about, the VA does have what's called a paid family member program, and the VA will pay family members to be caregivers, including a spouse. And there's also the home care program for veterans, where the veteran can get home care services, and the VA will pay a home care, an outside civilian home care provider will pay them directly. Okay. Different benefits coming from different parts of the VA. The money parts come from the pension maintenance centers, and that's the improved pension, the compensation, the aid and attendance benefit. That's money that's getting sent out. The healthcare department is the doctors, the hospitals, the prescriptions and things like that. And that's where the healthcare for home health aides is approved, and where they pay them directly. And the third leg of the Veterans Administration is the burial and cemeteries for burial benefits.
Now, the is this the program, the comprehensive assistance for family caregivers? Is this the one that you're just referring to?
I believe that a program of comprehensive assistance for family. So I believe that program, Steve, is what's called, what they're doing is providing services for family caregivers, trying to ensure they don't go through burnout. So they give them supportive services that they can work with.
Okay, all right. Well,
and
yeah,
can
again,
pull something else up real quick.
for folks to reach out to you on the details of the program there. Okay. Let me get back to where I am on the list here. Let's see. Kathleen says, every time I read about added benefits for being a wife, I think of discrimination for being single. Why don't institutions give singles the same amount that they give the married couple? That's a great question, Kathleen. And as solo agers are a big discussion topic that we have on here, but any thoughts or insights on Kathleen's question? Um,
Yeah, Steve, I can't, and of course, I don't work for the VA and I am not a VA employee. I can't speak for them, but just my opinion on that from what I've learned from the VA through the years, the VA is set up and designed to take care of veterans. Veterans or the men in the family, and this is kind of stereotypical of the older generations, but we're oftentimes the breadwinners. They had to
mhm.
support the house, whatever the case may be. So they have a bigger and better benefit as being a breadwinner and being a veteran. If they have a dependent, they get a little bit extra for that. If it's a widow, yes, it's a lesser amount. I get it. It should probably be more because the widow might still have to support a home,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, if they want to have that, but why they reduce it so much, I can't say, and I can't say I've ever heard anyone give me a reasonable explanation for it. I kind of agree with your
Yeah.
caller that put that question in.
Now, Pamela asks, does the VA have a look back period at assets, somewhat like Medicaid does?
Absolutely, they do. And this went into effect the 18th of October of 2018. Previous to that, they did not. The VA got savvy to how people were helping families get those benefits. So they implemented a 3-year look back period, very similar to Medicaid's 5-year look back period. They want to make sure there's not gifting going on, that people aren't intentionally divesting themselves of assets. And to artificially qualify financially in the asset column for the benefits. They could assess a penalty period if that is discovered that there was some gifting going on, or maybe it was unintentional gifting even. A couple of years ago, you were giving the grandkids some money for a wedding or for college or something along that lines. And if the VA were to find it, they could potentially assess a penalty for something like that. But I think what they're more concerned about, in my opinion, is that they are making sure people are not intentionally just giving their kids $100,000 when the criteria says they need to be at a limitation and they would have been $100,000 over had they not given that money away. People with a lot of money, they can work with attorneys, or we can introduce them to attorneys that can help with VA or Medicaid planning, where they can get, whether if they're financially sound enough to get through that 3 or 5-year look back period. Not everything in the VA is considered a countable asset like it is for Medicaid. Some attorneys will tell you that the home is not considered a countable asset, and you may be able to protect that in a trust. That's a whole nother conversation for another day. But it's something that's a little bit different than Medicaid. And I often caution people to, the rules are different for Medicaid than they are for VA, and they're also different for IRS. And a real quick note on that is the IRS says you can give away $15,000 a year to as many individuals as you want, but that's going to get you in trouble when it comes to the VA or to Medicaid. So just because one government agency says it's okay doesn't mean another government agency is going to say it's okay also.
Yeah, and boy, I've talked to a few families and individuals that thought that they were employing a strategy and they gave their assets away, and then they don't qualify for this benefit, and the people they gave it away to weren't exactly open to, writing some checks to help
Giving,
out.
yeah,
Okay. Someone asks, 2 or more ADLs, activities of daily living. Can you talk more about what you meant when you said some covered activities would be activities incidental to activities of daily living?
right. So you have things that are considered activities of daily living. By the VA, that would be bathing or showering. Even prompting helps with that someone can be there to make sure they're doing that because of dementia. Otherwise, they wouldn't be showering regularly, or maybe they're a full risk. Anyone that's using a walker, if they need standby assistance, is still a form of assistance. If that person were to fall in the shower, they would need assistance getting up. So those types of things can qualify as well. Same with dressing or undressing, toileting and using incontinence products, transferring from a bed to a chair and back, putting food in one's own mouth. Now that's eating. So it's not meal preparation. It is being able to pick food up and put it in your own mouth under your own power. Use a fork and take the food off your plate and feed yourself. If you can't feed yourself, that's considered an activity of daily living. Incidental to activities of daily living are more needs around the house, maybe shopping, helping with other things, answering the phone, doing some maintenance needs on the home, or housekeeping type of things, right? And these are more clearly defined right on the forms that need to be filled out and submitted to the VA. They have check boxes for that caregiver or that care provider, if it's a assisted living or a community or a CCRC, continuing care retirement community, that or that home caregiver or a home care agency, to check off which things are being provided. And a lot of people don't realize it should probably coordinate with what's filled out on the doctor's form. If the doctor's form says they don't need help, but they're getting help, the VA may not look upon that favorably. If the doctor says they need help with 3 or 4 things, then, well, if we're helping with at least 2 of those things, then we're probably going to be okay.
Man, let me just double check here. I think we did it, Scott.
Wow.
We have but I tell you what, I know you do a lot of programs like this, but do we have a pretty cool, engaged community with lots of thought-provoking questions?
We certainly do, and I really appreciate all the participation that we had today. Lots of good questions. I see lots of things popping up here. I haven't been able to read through all of them, but the ones I could read, I think that Steve, you got them pretty well covered.
Obviously, yeah, and don't worry, folks. We will add all of those comments on the recording link at proaging.com. This will be up there later today. You'll also have Scott's contact info. And Scott, please be in touch, and we can dive down some of these rabbit holes that we talked about. And then folks, I hope you found this helpful, and please let me know if Scott and his team ends up helping you out. I would love to maybe have you back on, and we could have a family or a professional that utilize some of these benefits.
Absolutely, Steve. It's been great being on here with you. We appreciate everyone that's here. We look forward to coming back and doing this again. We could do this every month as you want, but I know your schedule doesn't permit that. But as often as you like, it's part of our mission to serve the underserved veterans community. So the more we can help, the better.
You bet. All right, folks, have a great day.